Kim Ridgway, AC Transit.
Tom Horaeus, Tri-Delta Transit.
Mike Dalgelli, East County Paratransit user.
Sharon Keiki, East County Paratransit.
Josh Sullivan, Contra Costa DD Council.
Janet Bilbas, City of El Cerrito.
Vicki Wojciechowski, City of San Pablo.
Laura Timothy, Bart.
Rita Xavier, Contra Costa County Advisory Council on Aging.
Michael Hopfe, Independent Living Resources of Contra Costa County.
And so now let's go to staff.
Peter Engel, CCTA staff.
Irene Ortega, CCTA staff. Lindsay Willis, CCTA staff.
And I actually don't have my contacts on today.
Go ahead. Just introduce yourself right now.
To the audience now, but I actually can't see the car.
I'm Ralph Hoffman, downtown Walnut Creek.
Thank you. And I received some later. Okay. And
Jen.
microphone. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So the rest of the audience, and is there a microphone for them?
Leslie Young, Gold Rank Foundation, Oslo.
Thank you.
Larry Shear, Alive. Nicole Busbach, DD Council.
Thank you. And is that everybody?
Yes.
Okay, thank you all for coming today. And so that takes care of introductions. So now the next comment is public comment on items not on the agenda. And so that is, Ralph, I believe that's where you want to speak, yes? Welcome.
Ralph Hoffman, and thank you, Janet, and committee members. I've been to this committee meeting before, and I just turned in an application when I saw that you don't have any Central County members currently. I live in Central County, and my advocacy is to encourage myself and other paratransit users to use fixed-route public transit whenever possible. It saves both us money and it saves those transit agencies money. And this time we want to have the best service in our county possible. My background is, about 20 years ago I was chair and a member of the county, Contra Costa County Mental Health Commission, and then I've been on the county advisory council on aging, including the Senior Mobility Action Council, and several other type things. Like I was a bus ambassador for County Connection, and I go to a lot of their meetings, so I'm very familiar with both their paratransit and their fixed route budgets. And hope you'll have a good meeting. I'll listen from here on out. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak on items not on the agenda? Okay, I'm not seeing any. If you want to speak on an item that is on the agenda, members of the public can do so as we're handling each one of those items. And with that, we will move on to the next item, which is a summary of actions from the May 18th meeting. And are those minutes, or is there not a quorum?
Basically, they are the minutes now. We're just doing summary of action minutes for all of our advisory committees. So that's what those are.
Okay, but are they the minutes then? Yeah. Okay. So will they be called summary of actions instead of minutes in the future? Okay, for all meetings held here at the authority?
Well, the board and the planning committee, the sitting committees for the board, the planning committee, and the administration projects committee, and the full board are still going to be full minutes, but all of the advisory committees are now summary of action minutes.
Okay. Of action minutes? Okay, so the word minutes will be added there?
I think technically they just call them summary of actions.
Okay, I'm just wanting to make sure I understand what's happening. Okay, so and they still will get approved in the same way? Right. Okay, so we have in our packet a summary of actions, and are there any corrections, or is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the summary of action.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, and.
I'll second.
Okay, that was Kim, and I couldn't tell who it was that was Michael, thank you. Okay, are there any corrections in? Comments? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any objections? Any abstentions? Okay, that was Lori.
And I wasn't here either.
Okay, so 3 abstentions, who are Lori, and Janet and Laura. Okay, all in, let's see, then we'll move on to, so motion passed. So we're on to the next item, which is expiration of member terms.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. So this is our annual update of the membership on the PCC. We've got expiring terms on page 8. Madam Chair, your term is expiring this year. Michael's, Rita's, although Rita just started, the slot that she fit into was scheduled to expire this year, and the same with Michael. So I suspect that both of them, since they're new, would like to continue on the PCC, but that's their choice. And then for you, Janet, and for
I'm interested.
Michael, if he's interested in continuing. And the process is if there's interest from the 4 of you to continue, then the full PCC would just acknowledge that and take a vote to accept that, and then we're fine.
So did everyone acknowledge that they're interested? Okay. I think you have to be a certain age. Okay, then is there any further activity we need on this item on the agenda?
Yeah, there's a couple more items.
Okay.
So part of this as well is that the PCC continue to take action to recruit new members to fill the vacant positions, and that you, Madam Chair, appoint a subcommittee to review applications, and we do have one from Mr. Hoffman for new membership, and make recommendation for the new membership, and to make recommendations to the full PCC as to their application.
Okay, so I should do that appointment if I'm interested right now?
Yeah, you can go ahead and do that appointment of people to that subcommittee.
So are there any members of the committee who are interested in being on the nominating subcommittee? I'm not seeing anybody. I'll be on it. Okay, Kim, and then Michael? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
As long as we're all at the meeting. Okay, and why don't we say that the next meeting will occur a half an hour before the start of the next meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Unless one of these people cannot attend that meeting, in which case we'll have to figure out something else.
Okay.
Okay, great. And with that, we're finished with that item, at least that part of it.
Take action. We need to have action on it.
Which is what?
Well, full action to approve the recommendations, which is the 4 people to continue.
Oh, okay, so we should do that
Yes.
approval this time. Okay.
Right.
So is there somebody who would like to so move? Okay. And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there is a motion and there is a second. To reapprove or the terms of the 4 members whose terms are up. 4, 3, 4. No, they're all actually up, technically, right? So there's four people whose terms are up, right? Because that
Yes,
actually
there's
would include
four
Rita.
people, correct.
Yeah, okay. And all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any objections? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. And thank you, everybody, for agreeing to serve again. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Contra Costa Transportation Authority website.
Okay, Madam Chair, for actually item 6 and the next item after that, of course, we'll take them one at a time, but I want to introduce Lindsay Willis, who's the Director of External Affairs here at the Authority, and she was the one that took the lead on the Authority webpage. That's item 6. This item has come back. There was some discussion at, I think it was 2 meetings ago, about the web page. As a matter of fact, this discussion came up when we were talking about the minutes and moving to a summary of action minutes, and that we could still hear the full audio tape if we were interested in all the detail from our streaming system, which also records it, which is available on our website. So we got to talking about the website and said best thing to do would be have Lindsay come and talk to you about how the website was developed. We are making some upgrades or updates, might be the better word for the website. She can talk to you about those. So I'll turn it over to Lindsay. Oh, you have a fan.
I apologize.
We say that about Lindsay all the time.
Right. Think of that as a clap.
I have to share the stage with everyone around here, so one more person isn't going to make it or break it. Good afternoon. As Peter stole half of my introduction, so I'll just jump right in. I'm the Director of External Affairs here for CCTA, and part of my responsibility is updating the website. And so to give you a little history, I've been here two years this month, and this current version of the website that you see on the screen was actually kind of in progress before I arrived here. So I inherited the website kind of as it is, and now that we've had it up and running for about a year and a half or so in this way, shape, and format, we're looking to kind of do some updates, a lot of them behind the scenes, some of them kind of publicly more visible, to improve the website, make it a little more accessible, make it a little more useful for the general public, and also kind of on the backside to do some stuff. So I'm here for a couple of different reasons today. One, I wanted to talk you through some of the stuff that we're already starting to work on to make the site a little more compliant with some of the Section 508 requirements. And I also am here to kind of issue an invitation for your feedback. You know, I look at this website every day. I'm very familiar with it. I know where everything lives. But I'm not the customer. You know, the public is the customer, and you as committee members are the customer, and you often look at it with kind of a fresh set of eyes. And so I wanted to invite you, you know, now or in the future. I'm sure Peter and Irene can give you my email address and my phone number to kind of share your thoughts on how we can improve it, because we're spending the next 6 months kind of redesigning some different elements. So a couple of the things that you will notice is this site, at least this homepage, is kind of very picture heavy. And the pictures scroll, which I know can be a little hard for some of the screen readers to actually pick up on. So we're working at how we embed some kind of image text or something in those images so that a screen reader can pick it up and read a description for all of kind of the moving elements of our site. Most of the other pages on the site have very static photos, so that's easy to do. This particular design for the homepage is a little trickier because we rotate the pictures in and out, and as you can see, they slide continuously. So we are actually looking at how we can do that for this design, and if that's not possible, potentially even redesigning the homepage. So there will be one image at a time, and that makes it a little easier for some of the screen readers to kind of grab and read it, because you'll notice they also scroll fairly quickly as well. And I want to touch a little bit on the topic of minutes as well, because I know that that's something we use a service called Granicus to stream all of these meetings live. And that's also the service that hosts the agenda on our website and hosts the audio recordings. It's a service that we purchase and we contract with to use them. It's used by the state of California for the legislature meetings as well. But in terms of actual meeting minutes, the authority as a whole has adopted a policy that the audio recordings are just for reference. They are not actually the official meeting minutes. The written minutes and the summary minutes that are in your packets serve as kind of the official meeting minutes of the website, because there could be a point in time where we don't store or host those audio files forever and ever, and we need to have some kind of official record of the meeting. So those kind of written version of the minutes are also posted on the site in the agenda packets, so that they can be accessible for folks who may not have the capability to listen to the actual full meetings as they stream. There's still a record that's available to them. A few other things we're looking at is just kind of rearranging how people search for projects and funding, which is always a particular interest to the public. You know, they may see a bunch of construction in their neighborhood and they want to know, what is that and how do I find out more? And, you know, who can tell me when my exit will be open again? That sort of stuff. So some of it is cosmetic, some of it is behind the scenes, trying to make the site a little bit more accessible, and then some of it is just for fun, because there are things that can be improved. For example, if you look up at the very top for a long time, you can see it will tell somebody who visits the site that there's a meeting underway, and they can click on it to listen. But kind of underneath that Google bar and the little things where it says meetings and agendas, if you click on the words meeting and agendas, it wouldn't actually take you to the page. You had to click on this little tiny word that said more at the bottom. So we're working on just fixing little things like that to make it easier for people making bigger blocks of text, kind of a hyperlink through to another site. So that's kind of my brief update. I could talk about this all day, but I won't bore you because my next presentation has pretty pictures in it. And I'm open to taking, if there's anything you see immediately and you want to give me your comments, I'm happy to take them now. Or I'm happy to, my next presentation has my contact information, leave it with you, and any of you are welcome to call me or email me directly. Yes?
What was on? Thank you. It's age-related. Just a question. I've noticed on this thing here is I, too, find the scrolling things because of the way my eyes work. I've always had a problem with things like tennis and basketball to watch. The same thing as this kind of thing. Is there any way, because you were mentioning that you had noticed that that might be an irritant to some screen readers. I noticed that some websites have little arrows at the ends of the pictures which would indicate your ability to stop them or move them forward. So perhaps that might be something, because I noticed that helps me quite a bit.
To be able to pause it and yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Just to address the two issues you kind of brought up. The first one, you can actually do a random folder for the single picture. So you actually have a subdirectory listed on the back end of the site, and just have it pull up a random image with the appropriate screen text on page load up. And then that would completely solve the problem of scrolling through, and you'd get a different experience every time from that front marquee. Then the other is from the meetings and agendas. I wouldn't even necessarily hyperlink the meetings and agendas. Just do a block form. Just turn that little section into a text, or I'm sorry, a GIF, and then hyperlink the whole thing. So when you mouse over any part of that area, it'll go to the desired location.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your special skills.
Janet asked.
Okay, anyone else on
Right
the
here.
committee?
Right here.
Oh, Lord?
Well, I just want to commend staff on the website. I think it's a really nice website. I do agree with some of the other with the comment made by Michael that it does go, the picture scrolling goes a little bit fast, but excellent pictures, especially since you have the Richmond BART station there. But good job. Oh, okay. Well, that's good. That's good. I like it. I like it. But thank you. It's a very good job.
Thank you. And you know, one thing I want to reiterate is that a website, for those of you that maintain them for your respective organizations, it's a living document. So even though we are planning to do some updates here over the next few months, I'm sure you will see my smiling face before you many more times, because this is an ongoing process and it can always be improved, and there's always new technology coming out, and we're trying to stay ahead of the curve as best we can on that, because you're looking at the entire marketing and communications department. So we're working on your behalf as best we can. So
okay. Are there any members of the public who had any thoughts on this? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So are you ready to move on to the other item, or do you have more on this one? Okay, great. So the next one is the update on the development of the expenditure plan. You're going to be handling that?
Well, actually, I believe at the last meeting you heard from my colleague Ross Chittenden, who talked to you a little bit about how a potential expenditure plan is going to be put together. And so I wanted to follow up on his conversation to talk with you a little bit about some of the public outreach efforts that the board just approved at their recent meeting last week. And just to give you a sense of what we're hoping to do in terms of engaging the public, and I'll be making a plea for your help at the end of this presentation, but also to just kind of get your input on feedback and where we can improve. So over the next 6 months, the Transportation Authority is looking to put together a transportation expenditure plan to define how we could potentially fund future projects and programs. And I'm sorry, we're having some clicker issues, so I'm going to do this manually. There we go. So I just want to refresh a little bit for those of you who aren't familiar with what we've done. So last year, we were working on the countywide comprehensive transportation plan, which is kind of the gigantic wish list of projects and programs that people in Contra Costa want to see improved about their transportation system. And what you're looking at is a picture of the tool that we used online. It was hosted on the website keepcontracostamoving.net. And we asked people to give us their bright ideas and tell us their priorities. And we got a fairly lengthy wish list from the public. And you can see that we had a lot of participation, which was really encouraging. We went out with multiple methods. We used an online tool on keepcontracostamoving.net. We hosted in-person workshops. We had a telephone town hall, and we had paper copies of the survey as well. And all of these were hosted in English and in Spanish to try to get people to give us their feedback directly as we looked at planning for the next 25 years. Thank you. So now that we got all this wonderful feedback, we kind of had to figure out what we were going to do with it. And so what is really next for us is to continue to engage the people who have already been part of this process and to educate the public and let them know that we are planning for the future of Contra Costa and we want their input. And one of my personal goals is to really expand our reach and reach out to new people, maybe people who aren't kind of the usual suspects in terms of public participation. When we did the countywide transportation plan process, those numbers you saw, we had almost 7,000 direct participants. And that number of people is actually totals more than all of the direct public participation we'd had in the previous 25 years of the agency. So we made a gigantic leap forward. And my personal goal is to really double that number again for this particular effort to really get a broad cross-section of opinions. So I wanted to give you a sneak peek at some of the things that we're working on for that. We're going to do an update to the KeepContraCostaMoving.net website, and it's going to be some sort of interactive tool where people can take one of those little coins that we're calling Cocoa coins and invest them in different categories based on their preference and what's most important to them and what they'd like to see in the future. So you'll have 10 Cocoa coins that you can invest in different categories, and then at the end it will give you a little receipt for what you bought, and you can share it with your friends, and it will also show you kind of in real time how other people are voting and what is kind of currently the most popular category for investments, and you can see how other people are spending their Cocoa coins. And one thing we're doing differently this time around than last time around is we're creating a version of the site specifically for a mobile phone. So when you have some sort of interactive tool, it's generally designed for something that's a tablet sized or a laptop or a desktop size. You need kind of a certain size screen to be able to see it. So if you were to pull it up on a mobile phone, it could be very hard to see, or you might not see all the text. So we lost a lot of people the last time around. They came to the site from their mobile phone because we could see where they were coming from, and they decided it was too hard, so they just stopped playing. So we're trying something a little different this time, and I think that will really help boost the amount of participation. Thank you. And you may have seen this slide in my colleague Ross's presentation to you. But one of the things we're really trying to do is invite the public to kind of speak directly with the Transportation Authority Board and its standing advisory committees like you, because we want you to hear what they have to say, and ultimately one of your jobs is to advise the board members on what sort of investments you think they should make in the future. So this graphic is just a little bit about kind of the current process of developing an expenditure plan and the different opportunities for the public to provide their input to the board. I'm not sure if Ross talked about the expenditure plan advisory committee or not at the last meeting. So there is a temporary new committee to the board that's been formed called the Expenditure Plan Advisory Committee. That's represented by those letters that spell out EPAC up there. And they are feeding their recommendations. It's made up of a pretty diverse group of folks, business leaders. I believe there's potentially a representative from this council on there as well. Yes, thank you. Okay, so it's a broad kind of cross-section of different types of agencies and organizations that have some involvement in transportation and some not that involved in transportation, to help provide some opinions and input on the process. Thank you. One of the items we're also planning to do in addition to the online tool is another telephone town hall. These were really helpful last time because it allowed us to reach a broad group of people. When you host a public meeting, we have generally kind of between 25 and 40 people show up if we're really hustling and really getting the word out. And when we did a telephone town hall for the countywide transportation plan, we had almost 1,300 people dial in to listen. So it really extended our reach, and I think also the capability to have the TTY also made that more accessible than sometimes a public meeting, as people can do it from the comfort of their own home or dial in from their mobile phone. Go ahead.
Are there any plans to actually webcast live video from the meetings when you have?
We have not done that before, so we don't have video capabilities in this room. It's only audio. And what we have done in the past, what we did for the public meetings for the countywide transportation plan that we may consider doing for this effort, is we actually had Contra Costa TV, CCTV, come out and film them, and then they broadcast the meetings on the public channels for us. So that was kind of another way to be able to have people kind of be able to at least see what happened and interact. So We've been kicking around the idea of inviting them to come film some of our authority board meetings as well, especially as the process for developing a plan continues, and potentially the meeting where they release a draft plan when that plan is kind of explained to the public, kind of some of the more milestone type of meetings in the process. So another opportunity that we're doing, we're creating a printed version of the survey. Because what we found is there are definitely some folks who choose not to be online, or who can't travel, or who don't want to spend the full amount of time on a town hall, and they want to be able to participate at their own convenience. So we've created a printed version of the survey, and all of these are created and done in multiple languages, FYI, so that they can fill this out and mail it back to us. It's prepaid postage back to CCTA. And I think this is a place where I'm going to be looking to you for some of your help in places to distribute these to make sure they get out more widely in the community. We definitely sent them out to some senior and community centers last time, but I think what we really noticed is there's a big difference, and people are telling us what their priorities are. The people who participated online had one set of priorities in terms of kind of categories that were important to them, biking, walking. And the folks who participated in the printed surveys had a different set of priorities that followed kind of more closely around senior transportation and still transit. Those categories and kind of where they stood in public opinion were very different between the different mediums. And I think that we really want to make sure we're reaching the people who aren't online, who maybe aren't as dialed in as some other folks in the county, and a printed survey is a good way to do that. So thank you. We're also creating a stakeholder toolkit, and you guys will get a copy of this as well, since we consider you stakeholders in this process. And that's a whole packet of newsletter, text, and social media posts and other resources. So when you're out in the community, you want me to bounce him while I talk?
Well, yeah. I'm sorry. My
That's
daughter
okay.
was supposed to get here a little faster.
So the stakeholder toolkit will have resources that we're providing to you so that you can help spread the word amongst your constituents and colleagues and the people that you encounter every day. So that's kind of a really high-level overview of what we're planning to do over the next 6 months. Some of it is in development. We're still trying to kind of nail down the timing of certain things. For example, we know that the telephone town halls probably won't happen until sometime in the late fall, like October, just because we're trying to coordinate those with the different regional transportation planning agencies and combine efforts so they can kind of test out their plans and theories that they're putting before the public with CCTA. So with that, I'm happy to take any comments or questions or volunteers after Peter says something.
Just step in real quick here. I'll process. I know Janet asked Josh to kind of take over, but the vice chair is here.
Yeah.
So it's probably more appropriate that Michael take over at this point to kind of keep things moving along.
After you, Mike.
You can do it from there. Yeah.
I acknowledge that, and can I sit here, or do I need to?
Stay there.
I don't have to gavel anything.
I don't think we're going to have to.
Yeah.
So in the coming months, when it comes time for stakeholder engagement, I actually represent a council that has some of our hardest to reach riders and passengers. I see one of my council members nodding behind us. Would you be willing to come in and present at one of our council meetings, and then we can
Absolutely.
distribute? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And to give you a time frame, the telephone town halls probably won't be until later this fall, but we're hoping to get some of the other elements, the surveys and the online tools, up and running in the next 30 days. We just got permission last week, so we're pushing really hard to do this. So I'm happy to come present to any of your organizations and talk about it. And hopefully by then I'll have actual hard copies to give you, or I'll be able to provide them to you hopefully shortly afterwards.
So will we be able to look at a link, and can we have that link on our website? So for people who are
We
reviewing
would love for anybody to share it far and wide. So
Okay.
what we will do for the online version, we'll send out that website currently exists, keepcontracostamoving.net, and it's kind of the stuff that's reflective of the process that happened last year. And that website will be updated. When we update it, we'll be sending a notification to all of our committee members. We're going to probably send out a press release. We're going to try to spread that as far and wide, and we would love for anybody to host it on their sites, share it with their constituents, spread it on social media. You know, our goal is to increase participation and get as many people to be part of that process as possible. So yes, I mean, people do have to sign in. They have to create an account to be part of it. That's part of kind of making sure that it doesn't get hijacked by a particular interest group or person or hacker. But we did create it so that people, if you have a Facebook or a Google Plus account, you can use that, or you can create a new account just for this with your email address and a password. So we're trying not to make it too burdensome, but also make sure that we're getting true responses from people who live and work in Contra Costa.
Thank you, Josh and Laurie. Any other requests? Tom?
Lindsay, first I'd like to say congratulations. We are in awe because of the outreach efforts that you made and the participation you got. When we do outreach, typically, if one person attends a public outreach, we're tickled. But if I can you go back to, I think it's your second or third slide where it says what we heard? Right there. And I just wanted to point out to this group, because you're really a good group to point this out. Martin's not in the room to get on my case, so. Those are the 6 things highest rated, correct? 3 of those, if people will note, relate to transit. One is specifically about improving BART. One is improving bus service.
You want me to read all 6 for those who can't?
Oh, you certainly are welcome to. But I was going to just point out, and one is protect the environment. All 3 are transit functions or things that transit is good at. And I only point that out because as a transit operator, we feel we need to hold everyone's feet to the fire as we move forward in this process. And I've had the advantage of being involved. I was on involved in the CTP and some other things. And we don't want it to fall by the wayside along the way.
And I have as a follow-up, I mean, we do have this particular slide that I'm showing you as a PDF document that maybe we can email out to this group just so you have it and you can see it and you can blow it up big enough to actually read it. And since I know it's very small on this screen, but it's very much a public document and a reflection of what we heard. And to your point, Tom, what we heard is that people are really interested in creating more livable neighborhoods and having ways to get around from all modes, but particularly with transit, particularly on their local streets and roads. And one of the things that we did here, which is I don't think called out in one of those, is that 680 in particular was a corridor that folks have a lot of concerns about. It's getting more congested, it's getting more crowded, it needs better transit.
Thank you, Tom. Peter was next, and then Laurie, you had a... Oh, good, thank you.
Actually, I just wanted to add, and maybe Lindsay, without putting her on the spot too much, can give a little bit more information on this. When Lindsay did the outreach for the countywide transportation plan, we could really see the difference in what we heard priorities between the people that did the online survey and the people that did the written survey. I mean, it was fairly significant. The senior disabled service was much, much higher in the written survey, which we certainly understand. I mean, it makes sense. So that's why it's important that we find the best ways we can without completely killing Lindsay, making her go to meetings every 3 times a day and night, to really outreach and get feedback from those of you that are in senior centers, work in senior centers, different community centers, go to various meetings for, folks with disabilities. And if we can find the best way to get their input, which isn't just thrown on our staff, but maybe we work with you guys to gather the input, that would be ideal, because we want to make sure that all the populations are heard so that we get a real good sense out there of what the needs are for everybody in the county.
Okay, any other questions, or people from the public, would you like to make any questions at the podium? Yes, sir. Josh.
I was just wondering, I represent about 7,000 individuals in Contra Costa County that are vulnerable at-risk populations. Some of our folks don't read, have that. Can you give an example of the type of outreach to that type of, to my type of community that happened in this last wave?
So we, the last time we started this outreach, I was still getting familiar with all the different groups in Contra Costa. I know we did specifically try to reach out to some of the community centers in the priority development areas. This was typically a planning process, so we really kind of followed the planning department, Martin's team's lead. So we went to the Monument Crisis Center, for example, was one place where we made a concerted effort. We actually also tried to work with the library system to try to get information out and have the surveys available at all of the libraries for people to go. We tried to just do stuff that maybe was different and be in new places that we hadn't been before. And I think that's, we didn't do the best possible job that we could last time. We're reaching out to some of the communities that get lost. And I think that's part of why Peter asked me to come present to you, because I'm looking for your guidance and your help and your assistance if there are places that we need to be and resources that we need to provide. We want to do that. Our goal is to be as inclusive as possible.
And just as a follow-up on I think the next slide, it had a breakdown, maybe one after that. It had the breakdown of priorities listed. Did passengers with disabilities really rank in at 2%?
No, this is an example. Sorry, this is a mock-up that I did for my presentation. So this hasn't the tool hasn't launched yet. So this is not reflective of any real information.
But we don't want it to. Yeah, we don't want it to be, so we need to do some. So I guess, Josh, let me ask back to you. Would it be appropriate? Would it be effective and more efficient for us to be able to gather that information for the populations that you serve from you and your colleagues in different agencies, as opposed to talking directly to your clients? Or, like Lindsay just said, our ideal goal would be to give you the tools to gather that information for us.
I think, yeah, that would be great, especially when we're talking about folks that maybe use AAC devices, nonverbal, limited verbal ability. And just especially if you haven't reached out to the regional center system of the East Bay, they just got on a new transportation, I think, director. Don't quote me on that. Okay. If anybody's listening from regional center out there. But that would be a really good tool, because then maybe even doing some surveys to the 20,000 people that they actually represent could be arranged.
Would it also be helpful, though, to have it combined so that they actually see who the people, so that the authority sees who it is that the authority is actually serving or would be serving?
I think if that's a need of the authority, absolutely. But if they actually would depend that the delegate agencies are representing true to the folks that they represent, that would be their judgment.
Yeah, I mean, the goal of the stakeholder toolkit is really to provide a kind of a suite of options and a suite of tools and materials that you can then use to pass along, to invite people to participate, to direct them our way, however is most comfortable for them. And so you will all be getting a copy of that, I promise you.
And we'll get copies to other, like the regional center, other agencies. You suggest that we get those copies to, let
And I think just maximizing Lindsay's efforts, if you come to different councils or different entities that have multiple players, then you're only having to present once. Like I think of our council meeting, we have 500 agencies that provide services to people that are part of this effort that we have. And having you come in, give your presentation once, and have all of the agencies that we represent go out and deliver it to their, couple hundred stakeholders a pop, and you're there.
There's my phone number and email address.
Okay, so I understand that all the outreach efforts are going to be happening through December 2015?
Right. So, this whole plan in entirety, yes. The goal is to try to capture kind of all of the public comments by the end of October. So the way the entire transportation expenditure plan process is going to work is that sometime, most likely in November, the authority board is going to present to the public kind of a draft expenditure plan based on all the feedback that they've heard. So even though my slide says July through December, it's kind of through the end of the calendar year. This is what we're planning to do for public outreach. And once that draft plan is released to the public, at this point, we're planning on potentially kind of another round of outreach to get public opinion on what has been compiled in that plan and see how true it is to public opinion.
Anyone else?
I just wanted to, it was very difficult for me to read, that's because of the way my glasses are from the position here. And you were mentioning something about, are you going to be giving us a copy of this presentation so we can actually read it? I was not able to read most of it from either of the angles where I was sitting.
So Irene just confirmed to me that we can actually post it to the agenda online, the PCC agenda, and it can live up there as a PDF for you.
Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you very much, Lindsay. We really appreciate your taking the time, and we'll look forward to seeing those cocoa coins and spending them. That'll be fun. Okay, so we're ready for the next agenda item then, or let's see, did we get to public comment on that item? We did? Okay, great. Then the next item is the review of the Paratransit Agency Transfers Subcommittee meeting.
I'll kick this off, Madam Chair. You were part of the subcommittee.
Mm-hmm.
Kim was part of the subcommittee. Michael was part of the subcommittee. So I'll let you all provide input. We met a couple weeks ago. I think we had a real good discussion about transfers between paratransit operators. I think we both sides got a better understanding of kind of, what the laws are, what the ADA requirements are, what goes above and beyond ADA, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially if it's, for the betterment of the trip for the person. We are going to have another meeting. I think the next step we decided is to kind of get the operators in a room, and Kim made a long list from the operators' perspective of, things that made sense, and we should talk about these from, as operators, and then the subcommittee would get back together after that and kind of have that discussion. So I don't know if Janet or Kim or Michael want to, talk about the meeting and maybe some of the things that came up. Mm-hmm. Oh, and I'm sorry, Sharon was there as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll start by just mentioning that we mentioned that the operators who are involved in the actual transfer were not all there. Or maybe, let's see, Kim was there, so that represented East Bay Paratransit. And then I'm just sort of refreshing my memory right here. Charlie was not there, or no one was there from WestCat.
And to be fair, there was a subcommittee, and Kim was the only operator that volunteered to be on the subcommittee.
Right,
so.
but what I'm noticing today is how many of the other operators are here today even. Tri-Delta is here. What? I'm sorry, I just can't. Right, so it would be nice, I think we actually asked that they talk to themselves, and that would be the next, I don't know if I said that right. Talk to yourself, right? That they need to discuss it among themselves, perhaps. And I think we asked, didn't we, that be the next step? And has that happened?
No, that hasn't.
Okay, has it been talked about at all?
I'm sorry, it was my plan to initiate that, and I haven't had a chance to yet. So I will get on that this week.
Because
and basically what I'm going to do is probably call Kim and say, you know what, we need to really get this going. And
the other thing I'm noticing in looking at the membership roster is if you look at, and it was kind of related back to the comment that you just made, Josh, about the consumers. And I was looking at how many consumers are actually on this committee. And I can count to 3 there.
So actually, with that, Madam Chair, we have a couple service recipients out there that are interested. And I know when we were first talking about expirations and vacancies, we didn't actually go over what's required for membership, because I know there's some curiosity.
So we have an application, and what they would do is fill out the application, and then the requirement is that they have to attend 1 meeting. So if they're here, that fulfills that. And then we have the subcommittee that the chair appointed today meets with the applicants, and generally we do that before the next meeting or before a meeting. So if they can't make it the next meeting, it would be the meeting after that. And the subcommittee would talk to them and see if they're appropriate and make sure they understand, kind of what the PCC does and what their expectations are. And we can give them as well all that information in advance so that, they don't have to take the time to fill out the application if it's not something they're interested in pursuing. So it would just be to work with me on that. You and I can have that discussion.
Thank you, Peter. And Madam Chair.
And Josh and I did not talk to each other about this. But anyway, I may have interrupted you there.
No, I was just going to say thank you.
Well, I will say that there's 3 representatives from from the 3 parts of the county, West, Central, and East County. And at least one of those representatives needs to be a senior, and one of them needs to have a disability, and the third one can be either one. So we just need to make sure that there's that representation from the different parts of the county.
So you're in what part of the county?
I think we can, Peter, are you saying we'll talk about that later? Or?
Yeah, we can figure that out.
Well, except maybe some of it we could logistically work out right now.
Right. So if they're from East County, we only have 1 opening in East County.
I think we have some interest in East and Central.
Okay. Well, Central, we have 1 application,
So
and then we have 2 more
Here is the
spots.
reason I was bringing it up is that Sharon is from East County, right? You're one of the 3. And so you are a senior, and right? Okay. And Michael, you're a senior. Thank you. And I just noticed I was confused about who's vice chair. Sorry. You're vice chair. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So we have the 2 seniors. So the remaining slot. So there's 1 slot available, and that person has to be a person with a disability.
Correct.
In this particular case.
That's correct.
However, what I also noticed in looking at this chart, which gets back to the agenda item we were attempting to cover, is that we were talking about 2 of the agencies were not at that committee meeting that we were just talking about of the Paratransit agency transfers, and they also don't, if I have this straight, I think they do not have reps on the consumer slots.
Correct.
and one of them is not here. So it's what I think tends to happen is if you kind of don't go to one of those, like if you didn't come here, then you didn't know about the other thing, and then you didn't know about a third thing maybe or something. So maybe could perhaps staff look into that?
Yeah, and I think Laramie, who used to come here for County Connection and came quite often, he's certainly aware that we need Central County, participation from the user side of it. Laramie left County Connection to go to AC Transit, and so County Connection's still trying to figure out who they're going to start sending into this meeting, even though they have an alternate on here, so it'll be Ann Musini. So we will continue to work with County Connection to get representatives from Central County and both Kim and Charlie for the other two West County positions.
Okay. Okay, great. And just for the record, in West County, I'm the other one. I'm both a senior and disabled, so I'm flexible. I can go both ways. And so I just wanted to sort of tie those two things in because I'm thinking that they maybe are related. If you don't have people going to meetings, then you don't hear about what's going on, and then you don't know to tell them about whatever else is going on. And that is kind of what happened, I think, partly at the subcommittee meeting the Paratransit Agency Transfer Committee. So I think we could talk about what the people there knew about, but we couldn't talk about the whole picture. So my understanding is the next step is, as we said, for the agencies to get together, and then we'll bring it back to the subcommittee. And
yeah, that's correct.
Does anyone else there who was there want to add anything?
I will point out that we have Laura here from BART. Yay!
Yay!
And BART was actually a big discussion at that transfer committee meeting because BART is a central service provider throughout our county, especially. And Madam Chair, you have specifically had some concerns about paratransit vehicle access to BART stations, and so we asked Laura.
Interestingly enough, Laura and I talked about it.
Oh, great!
On our way here, and
good.
Laura brought it up.
Well, we actually gave Laura a heads up, that be sure and, look into this a little bit. So maybe, Laura, you can update everybody else on kind of what you found out and specifically what I think Janet has brought up in the past is the signage isn't satisfactory in some of the stations, and specifically you've mentioned across the street here at Pleasant Hill.
Yes.
For number one, an identified stop location for, in this case, it would be Contra Costa Link paratransit vehicles to where they can park, and also folks who have a connecting ride on that Link service, where they need to go to pick up the bus. So that's where all this kind of came up.
Well, hi. BART is always a challenge, I know. The best way when you have a paratransit stop that the drivers are having trouble locating is if they, contact me, and we actually have a new person on our staff that is going to start to help coordinate where the territory at our stations, because believe it or not, the intermodal territories at our station is kind of high demand. Like all the transit agencies and the taxis and the drop-off areas, they all want territory. And some of the transit agencies want maybe a little more territory than maybe they need, but it's hard for us to tell. So because they're looking into the future, and so we actually have a person now in our group that coordinates, helps figure out who gets what, and if we need to carve out more space, and what stops need to be next to one another. And the deal with paratransit is that most of our stations do not get a lot of paratransit trips because, as you know, to be a paratransit rider, mostly you can't use fixed route. There are a lot of people who use a mixture, but the primary riders of paratransit are just going from paratransit van and they're transferring to a paratransit van. So at our few stations where we have paratransit transfers, we carve out more space. But then there's a lot of other stations, all of our 40-some stations. Some we don't have any territory because it's in the middle of downtown Oakland or San Francisco, and some we have territory, but there may be a paratransit van that just goes there once in a blue moon, really. And so to give it a big space, we're looking at maybe some of those places that maybe they would share with maybe a hospital shuttle or something else. So we have a person who's coordinating it. We do have signs that we put up. I believe at this station, part of the problem was the signage got all changed and everything when they did the redevelopment, and I believe I've given signs out here a couple of times and they just don't seem to get put up. So I'll work on it again. And so there's two issues. There's the signs that go at the stop, so it's identifying the stop and having enough room for 2 vans for the transfer areas and at least 1 van for the other areas. And then the other one is the wayfinding signage for the customers who are coming off or BART to find that site. And that's a whole different group at BART, just not to complain, but just to tell you that that's then our district architects group. And Paratransit is not the only thing that has problems finding. I mean, obviously, Janet probably knows the elevators or a lot of things. So what they're doing is they're going in, they have now, the district architect over the last, I'd say, 5 to 7 years has developed a signage program where they actually help people navigate out. And the signs are getting better, the wayfinding signs. So that when they go in and they redo all the signs of the station, that's when that gets improved. So it's helping to direct people. I did want to, so I'll do my best to kind of bring that up again and get it forward. We are going to have on the East Bay Paratransit side, on all the stations where East Bay Paratransit, my operator's going to go out and look at every single site and check the paratransit stop and look to see that there's a sign. On the other ones out here, I will also work with our transit agencies out here to help them, because it's really helpful if the operator tells me what the problems are with the site. Is it, if it's not working for them? But I'll go out myself. I wanted to let you know about one other thing that BART particularly sponsored at East Bay Paratransit. And I think it's going to be very helpful for the regional trip coordination. And it's a program called Manage My Trip. And it's a software program that we purchased, a web-based program. And it's right in the testing phase right now. But basically what it's going to allow is the other operators, when they get a client with a paratransit trip, they will get a password and be able to log on, and they'll be able to schedule the connecting paratransit trip with in our software. We're testing it right now, but it's going to allow web booking of the trips. There won't be such wait times on the phones for these interagencies. Right now, we're still faxing paperwork through. I mean, the agencies are using the fax, and sometimes that gets messed up, so we'll get rid of that. And it will also eventually, we hope to allow agencies, or maybe even once we get through each test zone, passengers to go online, and those of you who can, or agencies, to review what the pickup times are. So that should really be a big help, and it should eliminate some of the errors or little problems that we're having. But also, just like you have to try these things out and test them out. And right now, we're in a test phase, and we will be creating accounts for the CCC users and inviting the CCC staff to come and train and in our office and test it with them and help also, when we do anything new, we have to develop some of our, procedures or rules or, how are we going to interact. But I think it'll be a real interesting thing. And we've had it for, I don't know. We've had it for about a year, but I don't know if many of you know, East Bay Paratransit's been going through a lot of things. We just moved our office, and it was not an easy move. We've been, having to struggle with that as well as a few other things. So hopefully in this next year we'll be picking up on that. But that should be a big benefit, and we'll come back and talk to you about that.
Yeah, just since I sat, they wanted to ask us too what we thought of what was going on at the meeting. So if I can just briefly sort of just add the concerns that I had brought up about, and this is a big long list of prepositions. Who pays whom when? I think that was one of the questions that came up, when is that going to happen? Is it the first operator that collects the money? Is it something that's done via transfer? And then also coordinating or clarifying what senior access is, in terms of priority and, what days of the week that can be done, or if it can be done, because I think there was some concern about whether seniors can transfer or if they could just use the one ride in their particular area. So just to make sure that that's either clarified or coordinated.
And so we're going to have the operators talk about that at their meeting? Is that what you're suggesting?
That's what I would suggest, but I know that there's some, yeah.
So if Peter's developing an agenda for that meeting, then this could be an item on that agenda? That's correct. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, let's see. So I'm not hearing anyone else. Any comments from the audience? Not seeing any. Okay, so are we ready then to move on to the next item? Yeah. Which, interestingly enough, is the Service Review Advisory Committee report. So part of that was already given. But there's a lot happening, as was just said, including, if you're curious about such things, why is the 19th Street BART station closed right now? It's because the new office of East Bay Paratransit is located in the same area physically as the 19th Street BART elevator. And so to redo that pavement block, that block of pavement, they have to shut down the 19th Street elevator. So that's just kind of a curiosity thing. However, what it points to is that when people are wanting to access that office, they can easily use the BART elevator, and it'll be very helpful to people who need the elevator to do so. So that actually is really good. And so the last meeting was the July meeting, and we redid elections of officers. And so the new chair of the committee is Don Queen, and I am the new vice chair. And the next meeting of the committee is on the first Monday in September at the new offices. So if you're curious about the new offices, they have a wonderful meeting space for people with disabilities, particularly people in wheelchairs. So, and as I understand it, East Bay Paratransit will be allowing other agencies, for example, the BART Accessibility Committee, which is a fixed route committee, to use that. And that'll be really helpful because the space where a lot of them have been meeting is going away, because that those agencies are moving to San Francisco. So this is just in the nick of time, I guess you could say. But this will be really helpful, and it'll, I think, be a better space. It'll be really close to AC Transit. In fact, the AC Transit Accessibility Committee will be moving there, and I forget the date. Do we have a date? The 8th of September? So we'll all get to see it in September. I guess see you in September counts here. But anyway, it's a real, so it's really a good thing for people with disabilities, and it should be really especially good for people who come to the agency by paratransit. And the reason for that, well, there's sort of a two-part reason. One reason is that they're coming there for their in-person assessment. And the way it's been before is that they had to come up to the office, and it was on Broadway, and still it's on Broadway, but there was no back way to get in. And so it was a little bit on the dangerous side to get into the old office, which they've now vacated, and from a paratransit vehicle, and you could really get blocked because it's such a crowded street. However, with this new site, which they are in now, they have a back, go through this gate, and there is a off-street parking lot where people in the paratransit vehicles can be unloaded. And so that will be in effect for, I guess, any use of that office space. So that could be either the in-person assessment, or it could be these meetings that I just told you all about. Whatever. It's just a real improvement, and it's an improvement for the meetings that we're meeting at MTC, because those were really difficult to access from the paratransit vehicles also. And so that sounds like a little thing. It's a big thing, a really big thing for people with disabilities. So I think we're all happy to see it open. And then I'm trying to remember what else happened.
I think we're going to plan in that same building to have the ADA anniversary celebration.
Okay.
And so we're going to have it in the new building. And I believe that's September 16th.
Okay, so September's the month. And there will be lots of announcements about that. Kim, do you want to add something?
Just a little bit of a clarification. So the next SRAC member is actually on the first Tuesday, so that'll be September.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I know that. I just said it wrong. I'm sorry. Okay, so I think that's most of what happened at that meeting. And are there, the next item is the Bay Area Partnership Accessibility Committee. Is there anybody here that goes to that?
Mallory
Yeah,
usually went.
I go to that meeting.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't tell who's speaking.
That's Laura.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a great meeting. We attend every time. One of the big topics that all the agencies have been looking at is the reasonable modification rule that recently came out last March from the FTA, and basically sharing information on how the different agencies are going to be addressing that in their own. And of course, it's a rule where all agencies are basically we're already supposed to be providing reasonable modification. And in fact, paratransit is one of those additional accommodations that we provide. But it's really just an increased awareness, and the new rule the main changes that most of us have to do is put something up on our website to make sure the public really understands that they have this option, a little more training for staff to make sure they understand to provide it, and a real more clarification on the process So if somebody requests one reasonable modification, what is your process? How are you going through it? And if you have a complaint, how you document it, respond, and how you have an appeal process. So most of us are sharing that. We show each other what our notices are out to our our drivers or our station agents and such, so that we can share that. And that was really, I believe, one of the primary things. The other thing is that, of course, we have continued discussion about the RTC card and providing that continued coordination and the expenses that the agencies incur across that. There was in some minor, just modest discussion about looking to the future on how we coordinate with things like Clipper and how will that, not in this generation of Clipper, but as we're looking forward into future generations, I think. Well, they already are working on future generation. They're already working on it, so. It's always good to start.
Peter?
Can I ask either Laura or Kim, either one of you brought up a good thing, the reasonable accommodation. Just for the interest of folks, if they're not sure what those are, there's like 4 or 5 criteria that once if it's a safety hazard, then you don't have to do it. One's of excessive expense or cost. I can't remember what they all are. It just might be interesting if one of you happen to remember them.
Do you have them right there, Kim, or? Okay. Well, I have them in my brain a little bit. Is what basically the agency's not required to do a substantial change of business. That's not the way they put it, obviously, but it's you don't have to just really change what your normal practices are to the point where it would really disrupt your business. And then the second one is it has to be needed for the person to access your system. So, just somebody who says, I want all the cars to be pink or something, but, it has to actually help them access the system. Okay. So, and then it has to, like you said, not be a safety issue for others or including the driver or anything. And what's the fourth? There were 4. Oh, did you look it up? Good. You can read the official ones
directly from.
Oh, good. Excellent.
Do you mind? All right. So, number 1, when the modification or accommodation would cause a direct threat to the health or safety to others. 2, would result in a fundamental alteration of the service. 3, would not actually be necessary in order for the individual with a disability to access the entity's service, or would result in an undue financial and administrative burden for recipients of federal financial assistance.
So they actually do go to quite an extensive description in the rulemaking. There's an appendix which is valuable to read, and they say that you should be familiar with the appendix. And the appendix lists out a lot of examples. There's a lot of discussion. So it's one of the things is that if you're diabetic and you need to have a little bit of food, even though the policy of the agency says you are not allowed to eat or drink on the train or something, you can have some food, and that should be allowed in order to to not have any problems. And that doesn't mean you sit down and have a 5-course meal, but a little, whatever it is, a little juice or candy bar or whatever you need. That's the kind of thing. So they actually go into some detail, a lot of detail about buses, like if there's a construction going on at the stop, the bus should pull, and you need to have the lift deployed. You can ask them to move up to another location that's safe, and of course, and this, the transit agencies, I think are pretty much on board with all of this. What the concerns that the transit agents have, of course, are the frontline staff having to make decisions out on the fly, and that's always a difficult thing. But I think, once people get used to the idea, it's probably most of us are already doing it. Reasonable.
Now, there is one thing that I don't think I heard in that list, but it doesn't apply everywhere for everything. And that is the need for providing complimentary ADA paratransit. Isn't that restricted to fixed route operators? So, for example, I don't know what an example is of what it's not, is, like the city-based programs in West County that are funded by Measure J, they do not have a complimentary paratransit responsibility as defined by the ADA, right?
Right. The ADA paratransit requirements are very specific, and they've not changed. They've been in the rule making for a long time, and so it's with what it is it's a little bit complicated to go through the whole thing, but they define different types of transit. So a fixed route transit is like AC transit, or they define BART as a rail, and so they go through and they define which ones have to have paratransit and which ones don't. And then the ones that have paratransit, ADA paratransit requirement, it's the 3/4 of a mile. So for BART, it's like little circles around our stations, 3/4 of a mile little circles. And then for the bus lines, it's 3/4 of a mile around around every line, and just the same hour. So that's why paratransit, ADA paratransit, is very complicated, because there's a big pile of rules that we follow in order to.
The other thing I was kind of wondering about was we were talking earlier about the paratransit transfers. Mm-hmm. I have been in meetings historically, and I'm just kind of checking in to see what's true now. But I remember hearing then that those transfers, let's say you've got an ADA paratransit operator and another ADA paratransit operator, and a ADA paratransit eligible person transfers between one to the other. I believe, as long as when they're doing it outside their service area to do the transfer only, that the whole trip, I don't know what you call the whole trip, but the whole trip is not an ADA trip. That's what was being said, at least back when I went to some meetings.
Well, we'll have to talk about that in our group. I think I've never heard of it described that way, Jen. I mean, I don't know if I just I think everybody considers it an ADA trip, and even though we're making a transfer, I think we all consider it ADA trip. It's just that there is no requirement in the ADA to stay. To not what we call drop and roll. Some agencies do. East Bay Paratransit does stay with the rider, but it's not so there are certain requirements in the law, that, like we were saying, some go above and beyond and some can't. And it really it's difficult because of the cost and the timing, because if you have your vehicles kind of locked up doing that, then they're not going off to get their next pickup.
So I guess the question I kind of had was, if you've got, let's use the city-based programs, because they're not ADA trips, right? As defined by us, I guess, I don't know. Anyway, but let's say that they're connecting to a ADA paratransit trip, then does that change anything about the ADA eligibility of anything?
Well,
Or is that too
What
complicated?
we would just, yeah, it's a little bit complicated, but really, we would still have our half-an-hour pickup windows and our 5-minute, we would still have our little ADA rules, and so, it would just, you have these meet times, and so I know that East Bay Paratransit, we have a person on staff, and that's 100% what they do is regional trip coordination. So, and then, just because we have so many connections. But I believe that what you're asking about is, so the trip coming in, that does not have to meet the ADA rules. But if they're eligible ADA rider and they're coming into our territory and we're going to pick them up, it would be an ADA pickup. So we'd pick them up.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So is there anybody else? Okay, Josh.
So Laura, have any of these changes actually impacted the mitigation system, the formalized mitigation system Bart, I know, used to have in place? I've tapped it a couple times. It's where, I'm dating myself here totally, but when I first started working with people with disabilities, there was an official line that we could call if there was an elevator out at the destination. You get off at the train before or after, and then BART itself would partner with paratransit agencies to carry you from there to the station that you were trying to get to.
We still provide that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Audience? Okay, we're ready to move on then, I think. Senior Mobility Action Council report. Who does that? Rita? Okay.
The main thing that we've talked about at our last meetings is an event that we're planning for October 23rd at John Muir Medical Center. And it's basically about transportation, of course. Our keynote speaker is going to be Dr. Patrick Arbor, and his speech is pretty much going to be about the aging brain and driving and et cetera. We haven't got that totally narrowed down. We were thinking of having also a panel, but they're still working. The people that are working on the program are still working on whether or not we have time for that. But it's October 23rd from 11 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. at John Muir Medical Center, which I guess everybody knows where that is, in Walnut Creek. So more information will be coming out. We've got several agencies that are working together on this. And as soon as, we have a meeting next week. As soon as I get more information, I can share it. And that's basically what we're doing right now.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments?
Rita, John Muir Medical Center on Ignacio Valley Road, not the administrative offices over here?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, 1601 Ignacio Valley Road. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, I guess? I guess we're ready to move on. Thank you, that was quick. Okay, are there any future agenda items?
Just for record, we have our regular items. We are putting an update for the transportation expenditure plan as a regular item for the next year or so, as long as that process is continuing, just to keep the PCC updated on that. I apologize, I didn't look back and see. I think we're kind of in a month where there's not stuff that happens on an annual basis, so we probably don't have any of those kind of things to bring forward, so it may be a short agenda. If there's anything in particular that anybody's interested in, this would be a good time to add that. If there's any operators that want to give an update on their service, that would be a good time to do it, but we'll take suggestions.
Well, there aren't too many operators here, but we could ask the ones, no, there's quite a few. If we get beyond the ADA folks, we have a lot of operators here then. But do you want to do something, Laura?
Well, I thought I'd say that everybody should know that we're going to be closing the Transbay Tube August 1st and 2nd. And I'm pretty actively involved with That it's going to be closed again on Labor Day weekend, and for 3 days, so a total of 5 days. So 2 days in August and 3 days in the fall, late summer fall, and it's to basically do needed repair work and on the trackway. And so we will be running a bus bridge, which we're getting a lot of help from the other transit agencies, and it's been great to work with them. They're going to be helping us providing buses. They're going to be ADA compliant, and they'll be running from 19th Street to the Transbay Terminal, and running as many as we can, although we're hoping that people who have discretionary travel during that time will stay and enjoy their home location. But we are also be running some paratransit vans to provide additional access. Although all the buses are going to be ADA compliant, we will be doing a small number of vans that will go from the 19th Street elevator to the elevator at Embarcadero for those who need that, more structured, yes, and not, not have to walk from the Transbay over to the BART or take an additional bus. So we will be running that.
A lot of wheelchair spaces on them?
They will be paratransit lift vans.
Will they be wheelchair accessible?
The lift vans.
Spaces.
The lift vans will have their normal number of lift vans spaces, and then but we'll be running. I think we're running 6, so we'll try to keep 3 on each side. The hope is that most people, even wheelchair users, will be able to use the regular fixed route accessible buses.
But
which that'll be that's the bulk of the.
So the problem with all of that is that on a regular BART train, there are going through the tunnel. I don't know how many on average.
This is not ideal, obviously.
But that will be equivalent to running one-car trains for people in wheelchairs.
No, each bus will be accessible. So every bus.
No, but each bus has 2 spots, and
yeah, but the buses also don't hold nearly what the trains hold either. It's going to be a reduced service. It's really a lifeline
but
service.
I guess what I'm suggesting is if there could be some way so that people in wheelchairs could actually have some level of possibility of getting from one side to the other, because there's a real strain put on everything that people in wheelchairs use.
Yes.
And that won't quite.
There's regular paratransit is not stopping. This is an addition to it. So if you're a paratransit user.
So then they just need to take paratransit, regular paratransit.
Yeah, but all of traffic is going to be not good.
So
just anything that's discretionary should be considered, but there is going to be high levels of traffic. And so, but we will have regular paratransit. We'll have a fixed route, what we're calling a fixed route bus bridge for kind of lifeline services going over there. And additionally, we'll have some additional paratransit vans making the similar loop. And then we'll also have ambassadors and volunteers at the stations to help, direct people and sort them.
So for anybody who's eligible for ADA paratransit and uses a wheelchair, I don't know if there's a way to identify them or if it even needs to be restricted just to that, but if they could be, probably that would, if you could know whether or not they use the lift on a lift van, then they could just be directed that way so that the people who don't have ADA certification would have would have more of a possibility of being able to actually get across.
Will the ambassadors be trained to kind of direct certain disabilities?
Yeah, we're gonna we're going to train them. They are getting trained to direct people who need the additional assistance to the little smaller vans, obviously. I mean, we want to get people onto the big buses as much as possible because that's what we have the most capacity and the most frequency with. They're going to be running them. But, and we have more limited capacity on the little vans. So, yeah, they're going to, if somebody, and also we're being a little bit tricky, is that the little vans are going to be staged at the elevators, and the big buses are going to be staged down at the stairway and escalators. So when you come out of the BART station, if you're a regular able-bodied user, you're going to see the big buses. And when you come out of the elevator, you're going to be by the little vans. But the
well, it's
will
just
be
the
in
volume. It won't. There's a lot of people who use who use elevators, who use wheelchairs, who use BART, and
we will direct the ones who can down to the big buses, and they will get some priority on getting on there.
Last time I checked, nobody who uses the wheelchair fits in that description, right?
Nobody.
Oh, the big buses, two could, yeah. Two put, anyway, let's move on in the conversation. Go ahead, please.
I thought I had heard earlier, since this is going to be August and September, that the 19th Street BART station elevator is not in service because of some construction issue. Did I mishear that?
It's not in service this last weekend and today and maybe tomorrow, but we're rushing that job to get that done so that it will be in service for the August 1st weekend.
Okay, Josh? I'm sorry.
Is there a call for volunteers or a flyer for the ambassadors that we could spread out through our groups? I think that would be it's an advocacy opportunity for community members.
I'll find out. I think most of the volunteers right now are employees of the agencies, the various agencies. But we'll see. I'll see if there's other.
Okay, so future agenda items, Peter, or do you still on this one?
Yeah, is there an outreach? I mean, I think we hear a lot about it, right, on the radio about the tube being closed, but is there an outreach effort when people are making ADA trips from, people calling in to make trips, are they just reminded that the tube's going to be closed, or which means traffic's going to be bad? I mean, that's, maybe they don't take BART anyway, but the fact that traffic is just going to be a parking lot on the bridge, it's going to extend the length of their trip into the city, and if it's a discretionary trip, maybe there's a better time for them to take that trip.
Yeah, we've already started. I think we've already started what we call the top of the tree. So when you call in, you get a little message just to remind people, and all of our call center agents at East Bay. But you guys might want to too, to remind anyone the transfer people. But we'll. We're continuing, but what we found during the BART strike and some of the other times when we warned off people, that we did not get any decrease in paratransit ridership. People are just willing to take a long trip if they can continue.
They're used to it. Okay, are we ready to move on to news to share? News to share? Thank you for putting up with my grandson. That was not, that had not been anticipated. But, yes.
So just in the developmental disabilities community, I would say that there is a pretty significant change coming. It's called self-determination, and it's being piloted here in the East Bay. We're one of the regional centers that are providing it. And it actually enables folks to take direct control of their personal budget and the choices that are available to them, and that they could actually purchase services outside of the normal vendorization paths. And I would bring it up here because that might actually impact some of our paratransit providers in a good way, because it's a different way to start that relationship other than relying on regional center for purchase of services.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Our next meeting is in September, right?
Yes, September
21st.